Okay, so as you can see, the system is set up. I have the IP addresses set up. Everything is set up okay for your out-of-band access. It's in a cluster configuration, so that's good. And then I have my virtual address here set up. So as you can see right now, no chassis have been discovered, and in 141 we actually do support rack-mounted UCS class as well. I don't have any of those right now in the lab, but as you can see, right now the fabric interconnects have not been set up. So the first thing that I always do before I do anything is I set up my policies. Now this is important because this is going to basically set up the global policies for the whole system. So in my system, I use 4 links from the fabric interconnect down into each fabric extender, or what we call I/O module. So I want to discover by 4 links. This could be set as 1 link, and it'll still discover with 2 or 4. This is basically the minimum number of links. If you're going to mix and match certain chassis in your setup, maybe you have 1 link, certain have 2, certain have 4. You could set it as 1 and it will work. Just for completeness, I'm going to go ahead and set it up as 4 link. The other thing is the redundancy, the power redundancy. That's important because if you have all 4 power supplies set up and configured and plugged in, you should set up to grid. If you have 3, then you could do N+1. If you have 2, you could do grid or N+1. And obviously, you could do non-redundant as well to provide, if you only have 1 power supply or something in the chassis. Or even if you have 2 power supplies in the chassis and need both, you could set it up as non-redundant. But in my lab, I've got all 4 power supplies and I've got 4 links going there. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. The other policies I generally leave blank. This is the purpose of these videos is to show you the initial config. We'll dive into the more advanced topics later on. But for now, let's just stick with the basic policies on the equipment tab and getting the basic connectivity set up. And like I said, we'll have videos with more advanced topics. So I'm going to go into the fabric interconnect now, and you can see if I go to the general that it sees connectivity on some of these ports, but they're not set up correctly right now. So the way that we're going to do this is we are going to go into the fixed module, which is basically the actual fixed portion, the 20 ports that are fixed here. And as you can see, there's all these different types of ports. In version 1.4, we added FCOE storage ports, appliance ports, monitoring ports for monitoring to do packet capture, as well as the traditional server and uplink Ethernet ports, as well as unconfigured. So all of our ports right now are in the unconfigured category. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select ports 1 through 4, and I'm going to set them up as server ports, because that's what's connected down into the chassis. Now it's very important, I can't stress enough, that you should enable the ports in the order that you want the chassis discovered. If you set it up and you don't do that, then you're asking for trouble, because in order to renumber the chassis, you have to basically delete all the connections and re-acknowledge them. It's a painful process. So if you have the system set up in the racks, it's important to have a good wiring diagram. You enable the ports in the order that you want them discovered. So I only have 1 chassis in my lab, so I'm going to right click here and I'm going to say configure as server port. So the second I do this, it's going to start to discover, and as you can see, a chassis has been discovered now along those 4 ports. And I'm going to do the same thing on Fabric Interconnect B. I'm going to go here and I'm going to configure ports 1 through 4 as server ports. Okay, so if I go here on the Fabric Interconnect, you can see now that all 4 of these ports are green, and the same thing on Fabric Interconnect B. All the ports are green. That's good. That's what we want. The next thing I want to do is configure the uplink Ethernet ports, which are, in my case, are port 20. I have a 10 gig link upstream. Now, it's very important that you understand what you're getting into when you configure the uplinks. When you configure uplinks, you have to know whether you're going to be doing LACP ether channels or whether you're going to keep them separately. Just have 1 and 1 or 2 and 2 and keep them separately, or have them pinned to to different VLANs and stuff like that. I'm gonna have a whole separate video on upstream connectivity. But suffice to say, in general, most of the people that I work with, they have one connection going from A to an upstream switch, and then one connection from B to a different upstream switch. So I'm going to go ahead and configure these as 10 gig uplink Ethernet ports. So I'm going to go into port 20 here, and as you can see, it's admin down and disabled. If I right click and say configure as uplink port, I can do the same thing on here as well. If I go to unconfigured ports and I say configure as uplink port and say yes. Okay, so that's done. So now if I go on the primary here, you can see that port is up as well. That on the other end is a Catalyst 4900M 10 gig switch with its ports set up as trunk ports, 802.1q trunk ports. That's what you basically want to make sure those ports are upstream. Now, the last thing that I need to configure is the fiber channel. So in my lab, I do have some fiber channel on an expansion module. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the uplink fiber channel ports here, and you can see that I have two links. And so what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to enable these links, and I'm going to put it on the right vSAN. Now, right now it's set to vSAN 1, but the vSAN in my lab is vSAN 10, and that's why it's down. So there's a couple of things you need to do. The first thing I like to do is highlight all the ports that aren't in use, and I like to disable them. Because by default, all the fiber channel ports are enabled. So I'm going to go to both of these expansion modules, and I am going to disable these ports. Okay. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create vSAN 10 in order to get them to link up properly. I mean, obviously they're not linked up; they're in fail state right now. So I'm going to go to the SAN tab, and I'm going to go to vSANs. Now, my lab is very different than most setups. Most setups are going to have a vSAN on fabric A and a vSAN on fabric B. In my case, I actually have them both on vSAN 10. So you have to know what you're doing here. You can't just use 10 and 20 or whatever. You have to ask your storage administrator what vSANs are configured on the other end of those fiber channel links. So it's very important before you even get to this point, is to have all that stuff laid out and ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK here. And I'm going to go back to the equipment tab, and I'm going to go to the FC port. And as you can see, now vSAN 10 is there, and I'm going to save changes. And then once I save those changes, you can see the link went green. It negotiated with the switch upstream and negotiated the fact that it was on vSAN 10, and now I have the basic connectivity set up. Okay, so as you can see, it went green here as well. So the good news, right, is I've got everything set up physically, right? The physical setup is done correctly. And as you can see, I don't have any yellow boxes around any of the fabric interconnects anymore because the basic setup has been done. I have a chassis now, right? So the chassis has a bunch of servers that have been discovered. It has 4 power supplies. It has 2 I/O modules, and it has 8 fans. So there you go. There's the basic physical setup at a very minimal level to get the system to a point where you can configure it.